Welcome, everybody. I'm Pam Cooley. I'm the Executive Director of the CSA Carsharing Association. We are an industry association focused on car sharing. So our Carsharing Association objectives, so basically we are a vehicle for discussions, for collaboration, for learning and solving problems. And we are CarShare ambassadors. All the members, including myself, can go and speak to people in your cities or in your local conferences around car sharing. And we just want to be the reliable resource for people to get together and support each other in the car sharing world. And next. We work with people all around the world. So if you're from another area or you see this video afterwards because of the timing didn't work for you today, we welcome everybody. We have members from all over the world, and basically what we do is we try and get people together. We try and create the forums in order to get people together and talk and learn about car sharing. Next, we are run by a board, and one of our speakers today is on our board, Peter Krahenbuhl, and Peter K is what I call him.
That was so bad, Pam. I'm not even going to comment on that.
I know, that was so bad. I even practiced. So we are run by a board and a membership. And next. Our focus this next couple of years, based on some definite engagement from people in our membership and others, that we're going to be focusing on building city partnerships, one of our major stakeholders in the car sharing world. We promote car sharing and we support car sharing initiatives. So for example, this webinar today is an example of collaboration. Next, with Venkatesh from movmi and an organization, a consulting organization, mobility consulting organization here in Vancouver, and with Peter K from CarShare, Colorado. So today's discussion is all about car sharing and the electrification of car sharing, electrification of cities through car sharing, which I think is really getting an uptake recently. And so we have an announcement of the next. We have a playbook. There we go. The car sharing electrification policy playbook. And we wanted people to understand that there's a lot going on around the world with expansion of EVs and car sharing. And we wanted to show you different examples and how it's happening, some of the challenges, some of the innovations, and what cities have to take into consideration, what CSOs have to take into consideration when they're trying to electrify their fleets. So we will be giving everybody a copy of this along with the video after. And so we look forward to sending that to you after the webinar. So today we have two guests. One is, as I said, Venkatesh Gopal, and next. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about, so Venkatesh is going to do more on the sort of what's in the playbook and some examples of the that he has discovered and worked on all over the world. And then Peter's going to be bringing it down to sort of a more operational level where we can study and ask him questions and see what his experience is. And then we'll open it up to questions and answers and some discussion after that. So I'm going to right away send it over to Venkatesh so we can have more discussion on the end of the presentations. So welcome, Venkatesh, and thank you for your time and your effort towards this playbook. It looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. No, this is this playbook actually came out from the project that we have been working with Peter over the past year, and yeah, this has been. I'm very grateful for all the interviews that I've had as part of this playbook together. And yeah, thanks for bringing this all together to the community and to the CarShare Association. Glad it's here. We all are here. So hi everyone, my name is Venkatesh Gopal from movmi, and I'm here to share some of the insights from the case studies included as part of the EV CarShare playbook we just released. First off, thanks to all the expert interviewees. Some of you are here today with us. So glad we could share this operationally critical examples to prove how EVs work for CarShare. Next. Quick intro about us. movmi, we are shared mobility consultants. We have been working with municipalities, shared mobility operators, bike share, car share, scooter share, you name it. Real estate developers, public transport agencies, and shared mobility technology providers over the past decade. And I personally have learned a ton about what works and what doesn't in shared mobility through our projects. Because half a decade ago, most of it was just like cool news to me. I would read about it and I wouldn't understand too much details. But yeah, since I've been working with all of the clients and the partners here, I'm glad I did. Next, we worked on projects across Canada and US and Europe and Australia, even Middle East. And that's a total of 87 projects and counting. And this has been one of the greatest thing that I've enjoyed doing, because it's not one project, it's not one policy, it's always one city, one project, a combination of local dynamics all together, and it makes it very interesting to keep working. Enough about movmi for now. Let's get to the topic at hand. Next, thank you. So the why EVs in CarShare, one would ask, and we've been asked this question from so many municipalities and policymakers. And this is compared to just making EVs, EV adoption easier through privately owned vehicles, right? And because each shared vehicle, and know it, benefits the entire community around it, and not just a one-to-one ratio. It's a one-to-many relationship for zero-emission vehicles benefits. So here's a snapshot that you'll find on the playbook. Next. Next. Starting with HOURCAR, we interviewed Paul and Will, who've been with HOURCAR for so many years now. HOURCAR, a nonprofit car share operating in cities in Minnesota, US. And they've seen EVs as soon as they introduced were an immediate hit with the members. So more utilization, which means better feasibility and appetite to get more EVs in fleet. And all of this proves how vital EVs are for car sharing and for the members. And this has given multifold environmental benefit. So less cars with car share, and that too zero emission. But the reason why this could all be possible, given the fact that EVs are expensive, right? So HOURCAR could do this only all thanks to public funding support from the federal and the state level funding programs. It's been multiple years of seeking funding, making sure that it's in the right place, and they are eligible as nonprofit car shares to put on these EVs in their fleet. And without that, these programs wouldn't be as successful as they are today. Next. Case number 2, example number 2, continuing with public support. GreenMobility is an all EV free-floating car share in Europe, and they have been welcomed in so many cities with an EV favoring car share policy framework in cities like Copenhagen, Oslo, Dusseldorf, where there is free parking absolutely for EVs in car share, but not free for EVs, I mean, for general car share, right? So general car share, there is some permit and there is some support, but EVs were just benefited even more. And in Helsinki, the discount was not about free, but it was to the level that it was pretty feasible for them. Also in Vancouver, as I'm in Vancouver in Canada, parking incentives are also in place for EVs in car share. Like one of our previous interviews, when we did this, I think some project with the city of Vancouver a couple of years back, one of the operators agreed that they would take free parking, even if they had to install EV stations themselves. So talk about like feasibility. Policy for on-street parking is a lot more leveraging and leverage worthy than just EV cost or EV station cost themselves. Next. And speaking of EV infrastructure, we also got a chance to interview BlueLA, now part of Blink Mobility and Blink EV charging network provider. First of all, I love how this whole ecosystem works together, because the whole idea of putting ZEVs out there is just like supported with a charging network and at the same time the CarShare operations. Based on the state of California and the local funding programs there, they were able to operate and bring EV car share to communities otherwise would have been left out from the access of EVs entirely because they couldn't afford. So this was all about making it equitable and accessible. And again, this was only possible because of the funding programs that are available. And it gets highlighted, although, that all of this funding may have like some hoops that operators need to jump through, right? So it has a bigger equity mandate, such programs, and when all that equity has to be fulfilled, there some parts may lose out in terms of feasibility for the operator, and it may not be the best way towards self-sustenance, because let's face it, even the public funding authorities want EV car share to be feasible themselves, like self-sustaining. So security of cars, staff, and security and safety of the members using it is very critical. And municipalities, when they mandate EV car share locations, we also have to look at it from a lens of viability for operators. Speaking of all that, we have, like Pam mentioned, an expert live on air with us, who has been dealing with making car share equitable, inclusive, and at the same time sustainable, and not just environmentally, but also like economically and socially. So over to you, Peter from Colorado CarShare. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Venkatesh. Are you all able to see and hear okay?
Yep.
Excellent. I think we'll move back to Venkatesh with a project that he was alluding to that we've been working on with movmi, a part of which did result in this municipal best practices playbook. So it's been a really great experience. Venkatesh mentioned, public programs that are publicly funded. Then, of course, you have full private sector car share orgs. We, along, kind of in the HOURCAR space, also are in a slightly different space. We're a nonprofit, so we have been forced in many ways to look to different business models and ways of surviving. I kind of think of us as the little scrappy nonprofit that's been doing this for over 25 years and are still trying to figure it out. But yeah, I'll just say, go into a little bit more of that soon, but thanks for having me. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of Colorado CarShare in general, but then more of our electrification journey, and hopefully really just tee up some considerations from our experience that might be food for thought so we can dive into conversation. Next slide, please. So yeah, as mentioned, we're over 25 years old. We're Colorado's first, only, and one of the nation's longest running nonprofit car share orgs. We operate based on our mission around empowering our community to live car light lives and having a positive impact on our health, wealth, and shared environment. As a nonprofit, we do that with a two-pronged approach, right? We have our education, outreach, and advocacy around non-single occupancy vehicle ownership, but then also, and what many people know us as, is a car share service operator. Go ahead, next slide there. So we're membership based. We're in the greater Denver metro, Boulder County, and up in Summit County and some of our mountainous regions. If some of you are familiar with Colorado geography, it's pretty varied and dispersed and unique in many cases. We operate a fleet of about 70 plus vehicles right now, hybrid EVs, specialty all-wheel drive vehicles, you know, the fun cars with the ski racks and bike racks and all that fun stuff. And again, we're membership based, available to our members on a round trip station based model. So the cars live in their neighborhoods. They're not free floating, for example. Okay, next slide. Our approach really is to connect our car share locations with other mobility options nearby. And then through our partnerships, support mixed income communities where we can complement alternate modes of transportation. So we have the environmental side of what we do, and then the social equity side of what we do as a nonprofit. And then when we work in a lot of cases in lower income and disproportionately impacted communities, we also provide subsidies and discounts where we have partnership support. In many cases where transportation and vehicle ownership is our family's, you know, second largest expense, other than putting the roofs over their heads. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of equitable access to shared mobility, we do find it very important for us anyways to track the impact that we're having on things like public transport, biking, walking, reducing single drive vehicles, and then translating that into carbon emission reduction benefits and stuff like that. So we use not only external research, but we survey our members every year or two to actually ask them like, hey, before joining CarShare, did you drive more? Do you drive less? Do you walk more? Do you take the bus more? And in every case, we found that the positive impacts are there. And then we translate that in the next slide. You'll see, and we don't need to get into this because I think most of us here understand the impact, the positive benefits of car sharing, but we're able to quantify and then translate our impact in terms of, you know, carbon emission reductions, vehicle usage, cars taken off the road, et cetera. Next slide, please. Okay, so electrification, quick snapshot of our journey. We put our first EV in our fleet in around 2012-13, working with the city of Boulder and one of their Nissan Leafs. So we've been doing this for a while. I came on board at the end of 15, and then in 17, we commissioned a study to basically a feasibility study and a roadmap, so both internal and external, to see how we could electrify our fleet with the goal to really create a successful and scalable model that can be replicated elsewhere. In 2019 and 20, we started working with the city and county of Denver. And that's where, at the time, my idea was, you know, how do we get street side electrified car sharing in affordable housing communities, which then I learned the super fun ins and outs of like dancing between all these different city departments and like, you know, going to our local housing authority, Denver Housing Authority, talking to Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, where we did our permits, then going over to the city sustainability department. And, you know, in a lot of cases, you're dealing with different entities that aren't always communicating with each other on stuff like this because it was so new. And we were able to bring them all together and launch in the city's first affordable housing community with electrified car sharing street side. It was an awesome project. And then, of course, the world stopped with COVID, and that gave us a huge pause and rethinking. It actually was a refreshing break for us in particular because it gave us a chance to step back. We rebranded. We became Colorado CarShare from Ego CarShare to focus on the hyperlocal. We upgraded all of our technology and all kinds of fun stuff. And then through the CARES Act at the time, we worked with the city and county of Denver on COVID rebound, resiliency, recovery efforts for disproportionately impacted communities, and launched another half a dozen electrified car share in additional Denver underrepresented and disproportionately impacted communities. We continued all of that through 2021 with data analysis, really looking at where we could overlay electrification opportunities with our fleet usage and member density. I'll go into these in a couple more slides in a little more detail, but 23-24, working with Excel Energy, our local utility, and then most recently working with the movmi team, Venkatesh and his team, on the Colorado Energy Office's CAMP grant. And I'll tell you more about that in a second here. You can go ahead to the next slide. So yeah, again, started in 2019 with the city and county of Denver, partnered with COVID there. And then really our goal with that program, which was still successful and most of those neighborhoods are still operating. It's now 5 years later. So lessons learned, be very strategic, think organically, know that the funding could someday disappear, and really try to build a strong program in bringing together, from our perspective, social equity, sustainability, and resiliency in mixed income communities that, might not otherwise have transportation options. Next slide, please. So a big part of what we do, as I mentioned, is education, from municipalities and local public officials all the way to the national level. Really trying to help government understand that this is a form of self-drive public transit and the convergence of social equity, affordable housing, climate, and transportation. We were fortunate enough to illustrate this with the previous administration's Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg, our governor, our two senators, Bennett and Hickenlooper, the Denver mayor. And it was really a good way to try to get car sharing to be internalized more at government levels and help them to understand not just the transportation benefits, but the social equity side. And then I mentioned 23 through the end of last year, we started working with our local utility company, Xcel Energy, right? And they're a pretty big multi-state utility company. And they had to create a transportation electrification plan. So we worked with them to pilot in additional underrepresented and high emissions communities, which I think is really important for CSOs, car share orgs, as well as communities and municipalities to really understand that within the context of the shared electrified mobility space, that utilities are now a major stakeholder that we need to, consider as such and partner with them and realize that, whether or not certain groups out there might be denying this, the utility company is our future source of fuel, and we need to think about it accordingly. Just really quickly, lessons learned there. We dealt with a lot of mountain town, cold weather, really crazy things that affected batteries, that affected charge stations, battery range, technology, all of that stuff. And then also really put into focus for us trying to deal with the dispersed fleet where we don't actually own infrastructure. Okay, next one. All right, this is where I'm probably gonna hand it back to Venkatesh in a second, but yeah, we more recently, so this is 24 and now moving into 2025, through the Colorado Energy Office, we received a grant to do a feasibility study and readiness plan to expand electrified car sharing that was inclusive of disproportionately impacted communities, or DICs as defined by the state. We've completed that. We're looking to apply now for the full implementation, a much larger grant to help us to implement that across the Denver metro area. And last slide before I tee it back, just really quickly, and hopefully this will maybe bring some questions to mind for you guys that we can help answer. But we've learned a lot on our journey. Car sharing in and of itself is ridiculously hard, as obvious by many companies coming and going. And, that wasn't hard enough. So we all said, oh, let's try to electrify it also. And that became even more fun. But, high upfront costs of EVs for a nonprofit, access to capital, all the recalls, that was crazy. We've been dealing with so many new technology recalls over the last few years. And then, of course, the user experience around perceived range, so range anxiety versus the reality of ranges. Obviously having to educate residents, properties, government, those three core stakeholders. And then for us, we don't own infrastructure. So having street side access where we already exist to charging, which connects with public right-of-way parking and charging, and working with cities and utility companies and all of that fun stuff, is not something we have a lot of control over. So we've had to work very diligently and carefully with that. And we've done it all, through unique partnerships every single day that we work. And yeah, with that, I don't know if we're going back to you, Venkatesh, or. Thank you.
Yes. Next. Yeah, thanks, Peter. And talk about impact, right? So, and Peter, I noticed Peter humbly mentioned when he started off, he was like, we are trying to figure it out after 25 years and make it work. I believe it's the cities, oh, sorry. I believe it's the cities and the public agencies that needs to do that. And yeah, all of this coming in the light of like Canadian cities and other cities like Copenhagen, who have now taken a different direction on the EV rebates. So I mean, Peter just mentioned like these support programs are not going to be here forever. So yeah, case in point. And everybody needs to now think about how EVs going to be funded. We enjoyed working with Peter and team the last year to analyze locations for EV car share, where which locations would qualify for the camp funding criteria, but at the same time, it needs to have a potential to self-sustain. So may not be from day one, but soon enough. And the state and the municipality, when we presented this report and the logic, the rationale, they loved it. After all, the point of all of this funding is to keep EV car share and car share sustainable by themselves, right? So public agencies don't want to keep putting money inside. And yeah, it's something that I think all car share nonprofits and cooperatives and private operators all need support in terms of funding if EVs were to work. And it's not just for nonprofit, it's also for all the others who are not for loss, are they? So yeah, thanks. That's everything I had to offer.
So Venkatesh, on this one, can you just go into a little bit about sort
Yes.
of what are the different layers that you take into consideration in the data that you looked at? Just briefly, because I know that there's some overlay here, and it's
Yes.
important that to people understand how much it actually takes to get it right.
Yes. So thanks. I saw like the slide changing, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm short of time, so
No, you're
I have to
good.
skip. Okay. So this is the project that we did with Peter was actually not just taking census data, which was the demographics and everything else. It was also taking the infrastructure that was available. We tapped into GTFS and GBFS feeds in the city. We tapped into, thankfully, with Peter's relationships, we tapped into all the affordable housing and the DHA properties, which would be like potential partners. So it was, and also like with locations of public transport stations, we got like park and rides and all of that. So the whole point of the exercise was to understand which locations qualify as equitable, because the state of Colorado defines disproportionately impacted communities, specific criteria, environmentally, economically, all of that. So we had to derive which of those the census tract were affected or eligible, and then try to put a filter on top of it saying, okay, now let's see what works for share. Now let's see what works for infrastructure, because that was the whole point of doing this. When we get infrastructure funding, it needs to be in areas where Peter and his team can run CarShare self-sustainably while being qualified as equitable. And the EV infrastructure also should be in locations where the general public or private EV owners can use it, because it needs to be feasible for them. So that's the kind of the puzzle that we're trying to put together. And that's all the exercise was about like 7 months for us to do this. But now, hopefully, fingers crossed, we get into the implementation phase.
Can I add to that, Pam?
Absolutely, Peter. Yep.
So yeah, when we first started working with movmi, we took a couple of different tracks, a couple of different lenses, a couple of different filters to this project, right? We said, let's take all the demographic data, income, density, transportation, RTD routes, all that stuff, and let's look at just general where should we be, right? Like and that's what I just called kind of our market rate lens. And then we have the DIC lens, the disproportionately impacted communities, based on certain defined, income levels and diversity levels and different things like that. And then let's overlay all of that and see where we should be. And then hopefully some of them are going to be sweet spots that overlap both of them. So that was like the general like car share part of it. And then we had to layer on the filter of, okay, now where the heck are we going to charge in these neighborhoods? And that is where we really will continue to get into the weeds in our next phase of the project, because as you can imagine, and many of us here probably already know, not owning infrastructure means that almost every single property relationship becomes unique unless you can create your own mobility hubs, for example.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for all of the background of both the playbook and a little bit digging into the operational side of things. Can we go to the next slide? You know, the intention, no, okay, so actually, if you could go back to the playbook slide. Thank you, Aoife. So I'm opening it up to discussion and questions and answers. I know that there are people online here, like Gloria and others, who have also been doing electrification through car sharing. And I'm wondering if there are a few people, Gloria, particularly you and others, that want to chime in on perhaps some of the challenges or the successes of that you've had in your operation. Not to put you on the spot, you don't have to, but if you'd be willing to. It's kind of like, you know, there's been innovations out there. There's and the other thing that I wanted to touch on is that, yeah, the context is changing. On the one hand, people want to reduce GHGs, and then on the other hand, we've got some really interesting geopolitical things happening with the whole electrification, EVs, and that sort of thing. So I don't want to ignore that. I know that that is part of the discussion now, but I also want this to be sort of more like a how to, what to look out for, so cities and CSOs can actually understand what they're getting into in the expansion of EVs in their city and how to do it and to collaborate. Gloria, would you be willing to talk a little bit, or am I putting you on the spot?
I mean, I can share a little bit. Hello, everyone. Gloria Huerta, with HOURCAR. We're located in California, so Tulare, Kern counties, as well as Stockton, Escalon, Richmond. Soon we'll be deploying in Watsonville. And what we found for us, every location is very different. Mostly we've been deployed at affordable housing complexes, and that has been amazing. In Richmond, we were really lucky to work directly with the city of Richmond to deploy in city property, so level 2 and some level 3 chargers. Everywhere where we deploy, we had dedicated charging spaces. And then in some other locations, it has taken us years to get an MOU in place to have infrastructure in city right-of-way. And so it just depends on where the city is, where we're deploying, where they're at in terms of electrification. And for one of the locations where we are going to be working with the city, it took around 3 years to get the signed MOU. So we're really excited to be launching, but we also know that even though this has been executed, the EVSE deployment, the timeline might say 3 months, but in reality, due to utility providers being in the mix, it might actually be a year.
So that's really interesting. Peter alluded to that too, that, you know, having our stakeholder relations and dealing with partners like utilities is an added entity to and task to this, developing those relationships. Anybody else would like to chime in a little bit on their successes or challenges, either an innovation or something that they'd like to contribute to the discussion, or a question for discussion?
Christian Marco.
Okay, there's been
Hi,
some things.
Pam.
Hi, go ahead,
Pam,
Cormac.
Jeff Winter, City of Aspen Transportation Department and Cardigo.com.
Thank you.
First and foremost, thank you, Venkatesh and Peter. That was fantastic. And I really appreciate all that information. I just wanted to mention some of the challenges that you were asking about, Pam. And I'm not sure how many CarShare operators or soon to be CarShare operators are on this call, but I think one of the challenges to consider if you're in an area where I'm located, which is Aspen, Colorado, up in the mountains, and it is more of a rural environment as far as like we're not dense like, you know, Denver or Boulder and whatnot, is we've had our Chevy Bolt electric car in the CarShare program since 2019. And like Peter said, we dealt with plenty of recalls and, you know, also infrastructure challenges as well. But I think the big one that I just wanted to bring up into the conversation today was member education. The users of the vehicles and the electric vehicles for sure is, Peter talked about, you know, range anxiety, things like that. Well, in our case, more in a rural environment and not dense location, if anybody else on this call is in a similar spot, is we've limited how far the electric vehicle in our program can drive. So we actually have a different map set up for just that electric car and how far those members can drive, because we don't have a fast charging station at our parking location. We have a level 2 location that takes a while to charge. So we don't want somebody to go all the way down our valley, which is about 45 miles, 90 miles round trip to 100. And now the next person reserving the car is unable to drive it to, say, that same location. So I think one of our challenges has been that we have had to limit some of that range on where the car can go in the program. But the success actually has been that a lot of the shorter trips that our members are using are really gravitating toward the electric car. And we've seen actually an increase in usage since the end of the pandemic. So just wanted to put my 2 cents in there.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Okay, I think we have another hand up too. Was that, did I see another hand up? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Cormac.
Oh, Cormac, did you have something to add?
Hi, I'm calling in from Dublin, Ireland. So just to give you a bit of a European perspective,
Yay!
we were hoping to get GreenMobility into Dublin. They were going to bring in 400 cars into Dublin in a free floating service, but unfortunately we just didn't have the charging infrastructure, and they couldn't launch here. So and we're still hoping that they will come. Now, the plan here in Ireland is to have shared mobility hubs, and these hubs will have both car sharing, bike sharing, and transport hubs. So that's one of the ideas that the previous Irish government was working on. Now we just have a rollover of government ourselves here in Ireland, and there's going to be obviously different priorities. So, again, with the technological developments that are coming, we need to be mindful that we don't invest in infrastructure that's going to become obsolete. So there's a lot of the chargers now that may become obsolete with the advent of wireless charging. That will be highly beneficial to car sharing. And then one of the things I'm really impressed with, which has just launched in Las Vegas, is the tele-driving. So it's a stepping stone of fully autonomous driving, where the car is driven to the customer remotely. And that's a German company called VEY, and they have just started with Hyundai electric vehicles in Las Vegas. And again, when they need a charge, they can be remotely driven to a charging station. So that's a very handy thing to have, which means you can put the charging stations wherever you want and not have them in high value areas, which has been a bit of a problem. And councils across the world, they have an income deficit, and they're highly dependent on street parking revenue.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons they're very reluctant to hand over street level parking because of the potential loss of income. And even our councils here in Dublin, they actually charge the car sharing services for parking. But the one benefit is that the users of the car sharing have free parking anywhere in the city. So that's one of the benefits of using the car sharing here. But unfortunately, we have the one-way return to base. We don't have free floating. So I actually did a huge presentation to government there last year. I put a link
We saw that.
in the
Thank
chat
you.
there. So and I actually went back to college there a couple of years ago, and I did climate entrepreneurship, and my module was on transport. So I did a lot of customer research and studies. So there's
Thank
a
you.
lot of it in there. I'm a huge advocate of the autonomous vehicles. I'm really impressed with what Waymo have done.
Cormac,
yeah.
can I just, I don't mean to cut you off, but there are other people that want to
yeah, sure.
you're a little going off on the AV thing, which I do think is relevant, but and I do think that the car sharing industry has to take into consideration where that mobility is going and even be a precursor to it. So maybe car sharing can actually be involved with that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely a bridge.
Yeah. So Christian, you asked the question, can you elaborate more on your thinking about EV charging ownership and different approaches and the reasons for owning and not owning? I think that also Moto is going through that whole process. So can you speak to that question, and then maybe you can have a little bit of a different some answers?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have about, Moto has currently about, I think, 130 EVs, and we own about 20 EV charging stations, and clearly benefit from owning them. And of course, there's also the potential of carbon credits. But yeah, I'm just curious around other car share organizations, around what their, or if their sort of approach to ownership and the reason for ownership, our preference is different. Why different? And yeah, maybe they're able to speak to that experience. Thanks.
Michael, you had an answer to that, and we can go from there.
Yeah, we, so we started in 2018 and had a mixture of owned and non-owned. And the issues that we ran across all the time with non-owned ones was just the timeliness of our ability to get access to them. So whether it was to the software backend, whether it was to get to the breaker, to reset the charger, kind of whatever it was just a little bit of a nightmare. And so we would have chargers that could go down for a couple of days. And if you don't have a charger, then you basically don't have a station anymore. So we only do owned at this point. We've also worked with one of the charger software backends to integrate with Inverse. So we use Inverse as our hardware. So we integrate the CarShare telematics with the charger, and it works out great. So I would highly recommend that approach.
Thank you. Well, also, Rudy from Inverse sent in some questions. I think that we've covered most of them. One was about range anxieties and other issues that you were dealing with, Peter, but that got answered, and the seasons difference, yeah, I mean, and there's another one that I think that deserves a little bit of attention, which is some people would argue that car sharing is already difficult, and Venkatesh, you mentioned this, to successfully operate. Can you highlight some pros and cons that you've come across, for doing EVs?
So the con is clearly the cost, right? So most of the projects that we've been involved or learning about is EVs are good to have, but like Peter mentioned in his section, sometimes it's just too complicated to handle, right? The car share itself is not easy. So the problem with that is once you have the EVs on the fleet, you're already paying more. And in terms of like the financials, we know that CarShare and my guru from the car rental industry, he mentioned that, know your business. Car rental and car sharing is not about utilization. It's about like reselling cars. So the residual value is very important. And EVs have been just a roller coaster in terms of that, right? So one, you pay high earlier, and then now you have to like go back and see if that's even worth the way you've booked in your financial statements. And the thing that we saw with Hertz, they are not able to get to that value anymore because the prices are being, fluctuating and dropping since that year. So that's one. The other one is like Christian also has been asking EV infrastructure. So I know from our interview, GreenMobility, back in the day, they also experimented with incentivizing users to go and plug their car for in turn to like their driving credits. But it's like a touch and go at times when some cities and some users are able to use that and they oblige, but then most of them they don't, because free floating, you want to go from like A to B and that's all, right? So you're not going to go anywhere else and you don't care about how it gets charged for the next person. So user experience wise, and when we modeled that cost, we had to like take a big chunk of cost for the crew members to go and charge, and then the downtime that the car would have. Those are like big no-nos. You can't have, if you don't have level 3 chargers are too expensive. You can't have level 3 chargers all the time. If you have level 2, then your car is pretty much out for 4 to 8, 9 hours, 10 hours. How are you going to utilize utilization during that time? So that's the bigger challenge coming from the operational side.
Okay, some more questions or examples of how people are challenged or figured out a solution, even maybe from an industry point of view, and like what are people, even a supplier's point of view. Do we have a couple suppliers online too? So anybody else with a question or a comment? One of the things that I have been thinking about, particularly in the context of what's happening geopolitically, is is it like, are cities clear on what they want in terms of their goals and how to work with them in order to meet their goals through car sharing? And obviously there's no one size fits all. Is there anybody here from HOURCAR on here today? I know that they signed up, but I don't know if there's anybody on here right now. Yes? No? I know that Marco is on here. Marco Viviani from Montreal is on here too. Marco, can you speak to a little bit about how, you have been organizing with the city for many, many years. Just talk a little bit about the relationship and how you're meeting each other's needs, and any advice on how to develop those relationships with the cities around EVs.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say that, it's a work in progress. Municipalities, especially Montreal, not all the municipalities where we are is strongly involved in developing a public network. And so of course we speak since at least about when we started having EVs in 2010 on how we could profit of that network. And I would say that it's still difficult conversation in the sense that they are challenged between the usage for car sharing that they understand is a priority, and the the need or the demand from the private people, from owner of cars. I would say that probably the best solution that is, they are proposing is that of building mobility hubs in which car sharing will be, and taxi will be the users or the priority users of a part of the charging infrastructure. This is the way we are going. But I mean, if I have to summarize, is even if they are very supportive of car sharing, in this first phase of developing a charging offer for the public, they are challenged between give priority to car sharing and taxi or answer to the demand of new owners of electric cars that don't have access to a charging point at home.
Thank you, Marco. Any other final comments? Venkatesh and Peter, I'll give you a final word on just a kind of a wrap up, if you like. Any final?
Good luck. It's been a fun journey. I think that there's no one size fits all. And I loved hearing about some of the new technologies that are coming around the corner, wireless and things like that. And so on our end, we just try to really keep our finger on the pulse, and in particular by collaborating, by being a CSA member, because Carsharing Association's taking the lead in connecting all of these dots, by working with our partners like movmi and others, and by all of us continuing to brainstorm together and learn from each other.
Thank you, Peter. Venkatesh, do you have a final comment?
I don't think I can top that. It's just,
Okay,
I would
that was pretty good.
CSA, yeah. CSA is so well placed to play a role of making sure that every city comes on board with this kind of a support. And yeah, I think that's.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank both Venkatesh and up on the screen, because I just think that you're right, Peter, not one size fits all, and to have understand or know that there's a lot of people out there trying different things and with mixed successes, and that's what the CSA can come down, play a role in having those discussions and problem solving, and see where the breakthroughs are, and so we don't have to recreate the wheel all the time. So thank you everybody for showing up. That's I always say that's half the battle. I just want to reiterate that we are an industry association. We are focused on car sharing within the shared mobility ecosystem. So I always say that if car sharing grows, all of the ecosystem grows, because if car sharing grows, more people get out of their personal use vehicles and use the other modes as well. Our CarShare Association, if you're considering joining, these are some of the benefits that we have available to you for consideration. We have a quarterly chat for all CSOs members, just to sit and talk about different things that they're going through. We have a Slack community. We have a quarterly newsletter, a quarterly webinar. Although if somebody wants to collaborate on a webinar and sponsor a webinar, we're open to doing that with any topic that's related to car sharing. And when we have our global conferences, our next one is planned, tentatively planned for spring of 2026. So please put that into your calendar and budget for it. And those who are considering sponsorships for that too can give me a contact. We do a lot of, so this is some of our categories, CarShare operators, and we charge our membership fees based on the number of cars that they have in the fleet. So those more established ones are actually really helping us learn and keep us afloat. And so we have mobility partners, we have public entities who are members. The city of LA just joined, which is really fantastic. And And so please consider joining us. If you want more information, give me a call or contact me through the website. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, so please, we will be sending out the playbook. Please share this webinar when you get it and to your city officials. We want more city officials and more planners to get these into their hands so they know that we're here to help them as well. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for the playbook. I think it's a wonderful example of how the CSA can partner with an organization. And yeah, join our newsletter and our LinkedIn, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.